My my colleague Malia. If you have not had the chance to meet Malia yet, she is our
Yeah.
newest addition to the leadership program side of NCHL. So very excited to have her with us. She's taking over a lot of the NCAF things, the National Council on Administrative Fellowships, and doing the NAFCAS fellowship recruitment stuff, all of that. So I am so glad, so glad to have her with us and as a team member, and just she's going to help out with some lens things and kind of tag team with me and stuff for conference, all of that. But just wanted to introduce her and welcome her to the team. The other thing that's on our radar is the 2024 NCHL conference. A couple of things I want to highlight on that. You should have gotten a save the date for that. We're going to be having it back in Chicago, November 18th through the 20th. And I'm going to pop a link actually to the website if you want to just take a look at the Shell agenda that we have. We'll be putting updates there. Our speaker abstract information will go live on the 22nd of this month. So be on the lookout for the content areas. We'll be looking for a lot of the things that we talk about in this council and the other lens councils will be important topics for us to cover for that event. Two things I'll highlight for that event specifically. We're going to be at a different hotel, the Drake. So I know Megan and I are both very excited to be at a historic location and kind of share the history of Chicago in that aspect. And then the other piece is that we are different from the last couple of years where we've had an all-member conference. This is going to be solely organizational excellence, leadership development focused, and our USCIT members will be having their own conference related to the international global side of things. So hopefully the networking and the opportunity to connect with folks that are doing the same work as you will be even greater. It might be a smaller group, but I think more intentional in that way. Megan, anything else you would add about the event or?
I think I said smaller yesterday too, but I have to say the room rate is a lot cheaper than the last 2 years. So maybe think about bringing more team members because the room rate for Chicago in November is awesome. I think it's like $219 if you get in on like the early side. So I was like, that's pretty good for downtown Chicago. And then we'll also be hosting the Gail Warden like gala dinner, which is great fun that same Tuesday evening. So we'll have a great, I think right now, don't mark my words, but like a roaring 20s Gatsby style reception because we're in the Drake and it was built in the 20s. And then move into the gala on Tuesday evening back at the Field Museum with a totally different vibe this year, trying to make it feel a little bit different in the same place. So mark your calendars. It should be an exciting week. And then you can head into your holidays fully re-energized professionally and then take some time off for the holidays. So
Exciting.
Yeah.
Well, Alice, that's all my updates for NCHL. So I'll let you take it.
That's awesome. I'm really pumped that I got to hear that update yesterday in steering, and I was feeling less with it, but I was excited yesterday, but I'm even more excited hearing it a second time. So the conference is always really fun, but I'm excited about the focus, like being able to focus on really what this group is passionate about, and the change of venue seems like it's going to be really exciting. So if you guys haven't been or have only come as a one, it really is an awesome event. And if you can bring more team members, it's even better because you come back together with ideas that you can start to put into place right away. Okay. So I'm our speaker today, and I admit that I suggested this topic for the group, hoping that somebody else would talk about it because I wanted some ideas. So I wouldn't consider us experts in this space. So I'm happy to share what we're doing, but would love for it to be a discussion. I would love to hear what anybody else is doing or what questions you have, even if you don't work in this space, just inquiries, interventions. So you might even have a question that helps me think about it in a new way that could help us just turn a corner that we haven't looked around yet. So interested in the conversation and not coming to this from a place of expertise, but a place of curiosity. So just, do you mind doing, let's see, with the reactions, like raise your hand if you do work in succession planning as part of your job or support succession planning? Alyssa does. Okay. Tammy does. Cool. Okay. Put those down. Chat, Jason does. Okay. And then will you give me some kind of a reaction if you do work with executive development or support executive development? Jason does. Alicia does. Yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. So chime in wherever, ask questions. If I'm saying something that there's no context for you, I would really rather you ask me if I'm assuming a base knowledge that you don't have. Aubrey, thanks. Cool. And I get, if you're on the phone, you may not be able to do reactions. So let me share my screen. And for those of you who missed my boring beginning, I'm on day 3 of the flu, so I'm like a little out of breath, and I just don't feel awesome, but I am passionate about the work, so I hope to get carried away talking about it and not feeling sickly. Okay. Okay, I'm screen sharing. Now I just need to do slideshow. Need the bar to go away. Bar's not going away. We'll just do it the old-fashioned way until it does. Okay. So you guys know we are, there's got to be a way for me to get the bar to go away so I can get it into slideshow. There we go. Okay. We're all overhead. So this is why talent management exists. My team, talent management, we have talent management, leadership development, learning, change management, performance management, all of those things that you all undoubtedly work on. This is why we exist. This is why it's worth passing the cost of our overhead on to patients. We exist so that we ensure that the organization has the talent and capabilities to succeed both now and in the future. And succession planning and executive development are really key pieces of that. And I just mentioned this at the beginning to kind of frame, this is why it matters that we're talking about these things. So we look at succession planning as being kind of a seamless part of our performance management and talent review process. And we connect all of these pieces together. So this will look familiar to all of you. We connect our performance management, which is our look back at the past year, considering equally what our leaders did and how they did it. And I think that's pretty common in healthcare, but it's not necessarily common outside of healthcare that we weight those things 50-50. So we do not care if you got great results if you did it in a terrible way. And we don't care if you're the world's nicest person, but you didn't get good results. We weight those two things equally. And we measure your current success. Talent review, we are looking forward only at your future potential at Ohio Health. So you may have future potential somewhere else. That's not what we're assessing. We're only assessing what is your future potential at Ohio Health and how fast do we see you moving. And that's part of that pipeline that we're looking at for where can you grow in our organization. And that determines how quickly are we going to try to accelerate your growth, and how are we going to look at where we have you grow in the system. And that then fuels the succession planning conversations. So in succession planning, we do this from a system-wide perspective, where we're both identifying what are the critical roles where we need to have a succession plan in place at all times, who are the successors for those roles, and then for anybody who is an identified successor, they should have a documented development plan in place. So we're not just hoping that they're going to be ready. We have something that's built, that we're following, that we're monitoring, so that we have an intentional plan to ensure that they're ready when we need them to step into that role. And throughout all of this, even if you're not a successor, we want you to be having purposeful development experiences, because what we know is that none of us are as good at development as we'd like to think we are. We tend to think that development just happens, and actually accidental development doesn't happen that often. We're pretty good at backwards looking, saying that we had development, but we're not that good at things that actually actively develop people in a way that helps them prepare to be large scale executives. Because we know that that takes a combination of natural talent and a wide variety of experiences that, as you move up the ladder, really do take a combination of time, being in the right place at the right time, and exposure to really challenging circumstances. And then hoping that you have the skills you need and the support system you need to be able to thrive in that situation. So a little bit like being an Olympic athlete, you both have to have the natural talent and ability, and you have to put in the hard work to do it. And you have to have been in the right place for somebody to see you. And you have to have the resources to be able to invest in the talent and training you need. So here are some of our guiding principles for succession planning. At Ohio Health, the true hiring managers and decision makers own formal succession plans. This was actually really hard for us in our succession planning journey. We're only, I'd say maybe 18 months into our current level of maturity with this. We talked about it for a long time and couldn't get past a lot of the buy-in that we needed to be able to get to where we are now. We got stuck for a while where the one-up thought that they owned the succession plan, and they really don't. So I can have a person on my team who I think is my successor, but really I'm not the person who gets to decide that, because by the time I leave, I'm not here. So it doesn't matter who I think is going to succeed me. I'm not here to make that decision. And if I've promised that to somebody, I've actually made a big mess, because that person now has potentially an unmet expectation about stepping into a role that the person one level above that may not see them in. And really, it may not even be the person one level above who's making that decision, because when we're talking about preparing people for high-level executive roles, it may be the person one level above that who's looking for the person who we're really grooming to be multiple levels up. Because if we're looking at something like a regional market president, we don't put someone in that job unless we think they could be the system COO. So we're using those large-scale executive roles to prepare people to be in the top 3 seats. So that those succession decisions are being made really at a very high level and across the enterprise. So in a lot of these cases, the succession conversation is me, the CEO, and the CAO with input from a couple of other people. So the conversation is happening much higher than you would think. So each leader is encouraged to think about who on their team might be their successor, and to be developing people to be good succession candidates. And that should be the goal, to be preparing the people underneath you to be strong enough to be considered a successor. But it needs to be clear that you're not the decision maker in that, and that you're not having communications about that. The other thing that we've had to be really clear about is that there are lots of cases where a hypo may be a successor, but you can also be a successor without being a hypo. So there may be cases where the natural successor is the natural successor, but they're not high potential. They're just the person who will be the right successor for the role, but they're not going to be ready in an accelerated time frame. They're just the person who's going to be ready for the next role. An example for us is we have a person who is the successor for our chief general counsel. They're the assistant general counsel. They have the knowledge and expertise, but they've also been in that second level role for a really long time. So they're not a fast mover. They're moving in the appropriate timeline to be a regular successor. We have other people who are successors who are also high potentials, but they're fast moving. They may be on 4 or 5 succession plans. They're moving in an accelerated timeline. They could go in multiple directions. And so we develop them differently, because we know that yeah, they are a successor for this job, but they could also go to multiple other jobs and they're going to be ready really quickly. Alyssa, we have currently 40 succession plans. So 40 roles we're managing succession plans for. And then I've kind of alluded to this, but once somebody is identified as a successor or a high potential, they're considered enterprise talent. So if somebody's been identified as a high potential or a successor, then they still report to the person that they report to, but they're effectively mine to manage the development of. And if an opportunity comes up in another part of the business, it's fair game for me to approach them and say, hey, we have an opportunity in another part of the business and we're gonna tap you to come over here. And their one-up doesn't really have the ability to say, this isn't the right thing for you at this time. So that's something that has been important for our organization to understand, because a lot of times people were wanting to say, hey, my person is a hypo, but they can only take my role. They need to stay in my area and just be ready to take my seat when I leave. And so it's been a shift to say, well, okay, if your person's really a hypo, that's great. And also that means they're fair game for anybody in any part of the organization, because what you're saying is they're strong enough talent that we can move them anywhere in the system. They're a versatile leader and we could pop them in. Okay. Jessica says, what level are they typically? So we do this level, the hypo process. With this, we do all the way down to manager, and that enterprise talent philosophy goes all the way down to manager. I'm not usually involved until they get to the director level, but the succession planning, we go down to, currently we're doing senior vice presidents, and a select number of senior directors. Jason, it's been about a year-long process. And it's taken a handful of wins to get to this point, but I would say it's also taken like 2 years of me building a lot of trust as the talent leader. Did I get all the questions?
I think there's just one more about critical roles.
We have about 40 critical roles identified that we have plans for. Thanks, Tammy. Whoops. Okay, and then last thing I think I had here is a blank succession plan is better than a fake one. I don't have any blank succession plans, but I do say this in every meeting because there is always somebody who wants to put a fake name down, and we have to like look at each other like, so if this role opens, I'm coming back to you and we're going to put this person in. And they're like, well, I mean, you know this guy, like, this guy. And I'm like, if this role opens, I'm coming back to you. And so that's been a hard one, because there are people who really, really want to put someone's name on a succession plan because it feels nice, but that erodes the process. And this is one of the reasons succession planning didn't work in the past, because when you had a fake succession plan and then a role opened up, people would go back and pull the plan up and be like, we can't do this. This doesn't feel right. And then you couldn't do anything with it. So, Alyssa?
Hi, yeah, sorry. This is my first call, so I'm like, I don't know
Oh my
what
gosh, hi Alyssa.
forms are. I
Welcome.
just jump in. I don't know. So hi everyone, Alyssa. I work in talent mobility and succession at Mass General Brigham, and my senior leader told me that y'all were having a call about succession, and I was like, consider me coming to that call. You'd mentioned again, you'd been in this the work 18 months, 2 years. The process before, was there one that just wasn't working well? So it was like, how big was like the kind of transition? Was it from kind of zero, like you had nothing and now you have something, or it just
Yeah.
wasn't working well?
It wasn't working well. So we had gotten stuck in multiple places. We got stuck on some fake succession plans, like I was just mentioning. We got stuck for a period of time on defining critical roles. Boy, was that frustrating. Like 4 meetings to define critical roles, and we just couldn't agree. And it was like, I mean, can we move forward? So that was over engineered, and we got around that this time by just being like, we're not like, this is the meeting, we're just doing it and going. Keep it simple. And then we just also had to get to a place where, like I mentioned, there was trust in the talent function. People have to trust that the talent function knows the talent and doesn't have an ulterior motive. Talent has to feel like it's not really, I can't see everyone who's on, but I'm gonna trust this as a safe space. Talent can't feel like it's too much part of HR. And I think in the past that hasn't always been the case for us, but we're on a roll. I was really excited. I was just onboarding a new team member and went back through last year's a deck from last year's succession planning and was like, whoa, 100% of the things we put in place last year have been used. So it was really exciting. I didn't have that as a metric, but I went back and added it to this deck. Okay, I'll see if I can speed up a little bit. This is just to sort of show you our journey. We're right now in the last quarter of FY24. So for FY23, we're really focused on the senior vice presidents. I'm feeling super strong with our senior vice president succession planning. This has led to great conversations with the CEO that I feel really good about. We also identified critical roles for ops. That's our hospital presidents. In our language, hospital presidents, COOs, and clinical enterprise, which is our key physician leaders. And we identified the critical roles and got those first 40 jobs succession planned. This year, we've built the muscle of coming back around to the plans and being like, is this still right? Are these still the people we're comfortable with? What's changed? We've been using the plans, working the plans, which has really been exciting. And we're in the process of going back to the remaining VP jobs and saying, okay, where are the jobs that aren't SVPs and aren't critical ops that we think we would want to consider, we really want to have a succession plan for, and bringing those in too. For next year, we're planning on doing more broad education. This is all still, like, you guys are getting more information at this point than a lot of our organization has. And we are doing targeted development for identified successors, but we want to bring more transparency around that in the coming year as well, and then hope to take it deeper into the organization as we get more rigor around it. This just sort of gives you an idea of what it looks like in our year. So we do have these meetings quarterly, with the exception of the quarter that we do executive talent review, because executive talent review kind of encompasses a lot of the conversation that we have during succession planning. It's a ton of high quality information that helps feed it. And it also gives us a chance to bring in what those executives and senior directors' career goals themselves are. So it helps represent their point of view in it. I will say that one thing that has helped with that is I try to meet with like 2 executives a week, just in the realm of like, know your talent. So I try to make sure we've got 71 executives. If I meet with 2 a week, it keeps it pretty fresh for me. And that's just a talent conversation to know them, what's their career objectives are. I usually talk to them about their top 1 or 2 talent on their team while I'm at it. That just goes a long way in allowing me to represent their interests in those meetings, because their one-ups may not be there, and sometimes their one-ups don't represent what they really want. The one-ups may not know or may not be able to see it. So one cool example of this is we just hired a hospital president who was formerly the chief nurse of that hospital. And this is like my most exciting succession planning win. So a year ago, we sat in succession planning. We were talking about who could be, this is a mid-sized hospital, who could be successors for this hospital. We did not think the hospital president was going to leave anytime soon. So it's an easy one. We weren't that worried. And we went through and we're like, we're probably going to post this externally and internally because it's a really desirable hospital to bring in new talent. So let's post it internally and externally, no matter what, which sometimes we decide to do because we do want some external talent deliberately. So let's post it internally and externally. That's on the succession plan. But who are some internal talent? We had one person's name we weren't super excited about. And one of the questions on our succession planning grid is, are there qualified diverse candidates who should be considered? And we ask that every time. And we said, okay, what about the CNO who happens to be a diverse nurse leader? And the room was like, we don't really know her. I don't know. Is she good? I don't know. And the conversation was like, she's qualified. She's strong. She comes with this experience from outside. We should really be considering her. Like, what would she need to do to prove she could be ready for this? So we put her on the succession plan and we put in some proving experiences that we thought she would need to do if she were to be qualified to be a candidate. And we went ahead and started adding her to some system initiatives. We put her on some quality and safety system-wide projects, gave her some meeting opportunities to show her stuff. And then surprisingly, the hospital president left. What are we going to do? Pull up the succession plan. Well, we're going to post it internally and externally. We posted it internally and externally. And because of the proving experiences, she had the confidence to apply. And she got the job. She beat out the external candidate. So now we have a diverse chief nurse who steps into the hospital president role. It's amazing, right? Now she earned the job. I'm not saying like, yay, talent management, but the process worked, right? So it's awesome. And it's an example of how you want to have this conversation at the enterprise level, because her leader, the system chief nurse executive, wouldn't have put her on that succession plan. Okay, what is this slide? Oh, this is sort of what we just talked about. This is kind of the process that we go through in the succession planning meeting. And then I threw a couple examples for you guys in here. So we have one slide for every one of the roles that we have a succession plan for. We capture what's the time horizon. So if we know or have a guess of when we think we're going to need to fill the role, what considerations we have, like what kind of experience we think somebody needs to have. We also might put in there if we think we might change the role. So if we think, hey, when this role is vacated, we might redesign the role. And so we might be looking for a different kind of successor. We would document that there. If we think we would always post it externally, we want to document that. If we think we would only post it internally, we'll document that. And then we would track any internal candidates who we think we've got and how soon we think they're ready. And then we would put any steps that we need. And sometimes those steps can be very detailed. And they may be about people who are ready, or they may be about people who are blockers who need to get out of the way so someone can get ready. I would like to see us get better at dealing with blockers. That's something that we have, I think, a lot of room to improve in still. So if anybody has a great way of dealing with talent blockers, share your scoop. Aubrey, I see your question. How do you define those 40 critical roles? We consider all of our SVP roles critical. So those are automatically critical. And then when we simplified the critical roles so that we could keep the process moving, we ended up saying every hospital president is a critical role. Every hospital COO is a critical role for us. Every chief nurse is a critical role for us. And then every head of a service line is a critical role. So that's how we started. And then we looked at any place where there's one individual who is leading a strategic function or an operational function that is a defining part of our business. Sort of how we looked at it. So are we missing some? Probably. But we were going for not letting perfect get in the way of progress, since we had historically let perfect get in the way. I would encourage you just to start somewhere. Here's a second one. In this sample, we have no idea when this person is going to leave. This is a case where the president himself is a blocker, but is really deeply enmeshed in the community. And so the concern isn't so much about finding the right successor. The concern is preparing the community for us to have a change. So this is an interesting case where it's actually not a talent function. It's really a community relations function. So I find myself having to step out of my scope a little bit here to say, okay, who do I need to partner with who does have the expertise to do this? Because it's not my area of expertise, but I have the confidential information that tells me that this is going to become a problem. So I have to find the partners that I can bring into this process so that we can help prepare the community for a change that they're probably not going to be happy with. This has been one of the more challenging parts as far as adoption in the organization. I think we're getting better, but if there's one thing that the organization is the most challenged to trust, it's understanding when a job gets posted and when a job doesn't get posted. People feel really uncomfortable when they see an announcement go out that somebody's been placed in a job, and not knowing why a job did get posted or didn't get posted, and feeling really uncomfortable about that, reasonably so. So we have shared this slide pretty often with our broad executive team to help them understand why. If we have a single ready now successor, we're not going to post the job. We don't think it's fair or kind to post a job if we already know who the job's going to, because it wastes time. It disrupts more people's lives. It gives people a sense that they have an opportunity to apply for a job that they don't really have a shot at. And it also runs us the risk of losing the candidate we really want because they're disengaged from a process if they've been told that they're the successor and then they have to apply against other people for it. So this is a place where we feel like clear is kind. If we know that the job is going to Jen, then we're going to say, Jen's the identified successor for this job. We've prepared her for it. The role is now open. Jen, congratulations. So obviously there's a downside to that, which is why we have to make sure that we can prove that we've documented that already. We can also prove that we have made sure that it was a diverse process all the way through. In fact, luckily, we really can show that our succession planning process has promoted diversity rather than the reverse, has turned out to be really good for women and leaders of color rather than the reverse, because it leads to people not tapping favorites, but rather to looking holistically at the broad talent population. Yeah, that's a good call, Tammy. In some cases, you may be required to post them. If there are multiple ready now or 1 to 2 year successors, so you guys just saw the example of one of those roles, we had 2 ready now successors. We wouldn't post, we would approach the 2 successors and say, you are one of a small group of people who were considering for this role. We'll have an abbreviated internal interview process for this. If there are no documented successors, a wide number of documented successors, or the succession plan indicates that we'll post it, then we will post it. So for instance, the one that I just told you the story of, we knew we were going to post it internally and externally, even though we had names on the succession plan, and we did so. The good news about this is that if somebody sees one of our jobs is posted, it means it's a real posting and you really have the opportunity to be eligible for it. You never have to be like, that job's posted, but it's somebody else's job. If it's posted, you have a shot. Okay, so we're finally about to round the corner here to talking about executive development. Some of you have been very patient. So what? So what is, now we have a name or a list of names, and we need to do something with them. So once we've identified these people, we want to make sure that we're putting them through really specific targeted development to prepare them for whatever it is. So if they're succession candidates, we definitely want them working really closely with the person who they would be succeeding. We want to make sure they're being exposed to our CEO and SVPs so that they're ready to work with that group, and that they're working deep in the function that they're going to be leading. So we're getting them focused on that expertise in a specific area. If we have them in hypo, which means we're thinking that they could go more than one place or they could go really fast, we're developing them more broadly. So we're wanting to make sure that they're exposed to the board, we're developing them in multiple directions, or investing in their broad leadership capabilities, because we view them as a versatile leader who could go a lot of different ways. In either event, they have a targeted individualized development plan. They're getting a psychological assessment, which we typically do when we're recruiting an external executive, but we'll go ahead and do it for an internal person who we're preparing. That's we use psychological assessments. It's like an 8-hour-long psychological assessment, catchy name, which I'm happy to compare notes on with you guys. I went through it myself. It was delightful. And then there's mentoring, sponsorship, and executive coaching. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay. So as far as executive development, that takes a lot of different shapes. So some of this will speak to the people we just talked about, but also some of this is just what the broad executive population gets. And so I wanted to make sure to touch on some of those things for this group as well. So for all of our executives, in addition to the regular onboarding that everybody goes through, there's a one-on-one executive onboarding that is with me. So I onboard all of our executives over the course of like 3 one-on-one sessions over their first 3 months, working with them on kind of an individual leadership development and kind of cultural acclimation to the organization. So they're getting comfortable with how we lead here, and starting to develop a trusting relationship with me, so that they have a person besides their one-up they can reach out to as they're struggling with, like, how do I do things here? How do I navigate here? Who can I trust? Where do I go? Sort of as a stopgap until they have their executive coach and that executive coaching relationship where they can do that. So that transitions typically from them using me as an executive onboarding buddy to kind of executive spot coaching, I would say, with me, until the point where they have an executive coach assigned to them that becomes their kind of permanent executive coaching relationship. They also go through a new leader acceleration, which I imagine a lot of you do. So one of our executive coaches works with the new executive and their direct report team. Generally, once they've been in their role for about 3 months, to facilitate typically a day-long retreat between the new executive and their team to sort of work out the kinks. How's it going? What questions do you have? How are you getting to know each other? What's working, what's not working as well as it could? What questions do you still have about how to work together? How can you continue to build trust? Kind of to chart a course for how you work together effectively going forward. Generally a really positive experience, but also helps get things fleshed out before they become problems that are deeply rooted. And also sort of sets a rhythm for what tends to end up becoming that quarterly retreat cadence that we find works really well for most of our executives and executive teams. I think that's on here too. Yeah, executive team retreats. Most of our care site hospital presidents and executives have quarterly executive team retreats. And again, that's me or members of my team. I think Joe does this as well. We'll facilitate a team retreat, which is really a form of personalized executive development for that executive team that's delivered to the intact team. So it's not like coming to a course, it's like us coming to the team and doing executive development for that intact team. They get the same kind of content we would do in an executive development course, but it's also kind of a team intervention because it ends up being that facilitated group coaching angle. It's a little fun, it's a little work, and helps them advance their skills. Those tend to be really specific to each leadership team. No two are exactly alike. It's kind of local and targeted to the needs of the particular executives and the site. Leadership executive forums. These are actually led by our CEO. So once a month, all executives get together with the CEO. It's a little bit of business, but I would consider it to be development. It's just a little bit more on the business side. So we do have learning goals for all of these. Typically around business trends and business acumen skills. That's led by the CEO and whatever's top of mind. It may be around investing or AI trends. So not my specific jam, but just as well, because I'm not leading it. Executive coaching, I already mentioned. I know a lot of you guys are strong proponents of and executive coaches yourself. We definitely view executive coaching as being one of the most powerful tools in leadership development, and particularly for executives. And Ohio Health Leadership Briefing, we call it OLB. That's actually for our entire leadership team. I know that, I think Intermountain, I think you guys have a version of this as well. I just heard this is, and probably others of you do too. This is our entire leadership team, like all 1,700 leaders coming together in person. We do it twice a year. So it is pretty cool. It's really a day-long leadership development event. We just had ours, I think last week. It's pretty fun. Leadership development / pep rally, but it does end up being inspiring in most cases. And then I'll talk a little bit more about Excel. We're using Crossroads. That's a Northwell and Intermountain product, yay. And I just missed, we also use Leadership Columbus. A lot of cities probably have a version of that as well. So we use that I'm in that this year. So we use that for a handful of executives who need something and our other programs aren't appropriate. In my case, that's great because what am I going to do? I lead the programs, teach myself. So this is our first year participating in Crossroads. I was really excited to get to be part of it after hearing about it at the NCHL conference the year before. It's Crossroads. So we have Excel, that's our internal high potential executive program. And this year we also have Crossroads, which is the Evolve Health Alliance, Northwell Intermountain. I feel a little shy talking about it. Tammy, I'm looking at your face. But, and Alyssa, I see you smiling, so you also must know about this too. But I just thought it might be interesting for you guys to see how we decided internally at Ohio Health who we would send, who we would put through Excel and who we would send to Crossroads of our internal high potentials. And then would love to hear if you guys have any reactions to this. So when I was pitching to our CEO who to send where, this is how I did it. I said, hey, like we've got these high potentials. Here's how I think we should break it down. We have, you can see what I said, but basically the Excel program, let's use this for the people who need to better understand Ohio Health and need to raise their visibility internally at Ohio Health. And those bottom two bullets, those are things that we know that we do really well. We know we're really good at developing this in leaders. So I feel confident that we can say that we're going to develop this. But for Crossroads, we have some people who have already been through Excel and we're like, now what? And we have some people who also have grown up through our programs and our organization who have been with us since being administrative fellows, have done a great job advancing their career here and probably don't know anything that's ever happened outside of Ohio Health. They need to go somewhere else. So great candidates for Crossroads. So you can see how I sold it and it worked because we sent 5 people. So anything you guys would add?
I know I put it in the chat, but this is just very consistent with how we look at it. We have an internal executive program that graduates over to this Crossroads program as well. So just fun to see.
Awesome. So I'm pumped that we have 10 executives going through like specialized development and in addition to the things that the broad population is getting this year. A little bit more about our Excel program. These are some of the components that are there. We have monthly learning sessions from to experience maps. So think of this like a Google map. If you know where you're going from and where you're going to, you can chart a course. So this is a new format for us that we're trying to get really specific about. I'm going from being a results-driven, laser-focused on the end leader to an inclusive leader who considers the impact to others while still achieving high results. Just getting really specific about what you're trying to go from and to so that you can be clear about the kinds of experiences that will help you get there. We use assessments, as I know a lot of you guys do, and executive coaching. This year we tried using the PI assessment for the first time with this group. We've never used that in our organization before. We have a new hire who's really passionate about it. So stay tuned for whether that turns out to be impactful or not. We're using group coaching, which is also, this is the only program that we use group coaching in. We will have them do a TED Talk for the complete leadership team for that audience of 1,700 people. So they'll do that in October. They will have to work together as a cohort of 5 to complete a system project for a board goal related to customer-centric behavior. I'm super pumped to see what they do. And then we next month are doing an overnight retreat and service opportunity at Flying Horse Farms, which is a local farm here for medically ill children. So we'll spend part of the time doing the kind of things you do at a retreat, but part of the time actually preparing the farm to be ready for the medically ill campers. So really excited about that service component. And the kind of the empathy refresh that I'm hoping will come back for them. So and then we have some master classes where they'll get a little bit of a deep dive in these topics that they would like to know a little bit more about. Things that they don't need to know in their jobs today, but will need to know as they step into bigger system jobs. We have 5 in the cohort. It's pretty awesome because there are 3 of us on the program delivery team and 5 of them. So it's practically man on man defense. I don't know. I'm not a sports person, but that's a thing probably. Zone defense? Anybody? Good coverage.
You got it, boss. We know what you're talking about.
Okay, and then here's our Excel learning arc. So we have kind of an arc. The arc of our learning is it starts with yourself. We want them to start by understanding their deep motivations and desires, and kind of what's the gap between their real self and their ideal self, and balancing internal and external messages. Then move from that to how do we apply what we know about ourselves to how we lead, including leading a healthy culture. That's kind of part of our Leadership Academy brand, is about leading a healthy culture, and creating cultures where people can thrive, understanding what you can control and what you can influence, and how to build followership. And then from there, putting that into practice. And then we're working on also building out these experiences. So you guys may have seen or worked with something like this, but we're kind of moving away from talking about competencies. Competencies are important. We still know they're there. They're like the instructions behind the engineering manual, yes, but they're not how people actually interface with the experiences. So instead, what we're trying to do is accelerate the time that it takes somebody to be ready for those big jobs, like I talked about at the beginning, by saying, what are the experiences that will get you the competencies faster? And can we engineer those by putting you in the right situations? So if you could kind of map out what are all of the proving experiences and core experiences that you need to get ready, and we can see where the gaps are, then we can intentionally put you in the right places to have those things. Yeah, cool, Tammy. I'm glad to hear that. So this we're going to be filling out with this cohort, and then starting to work development plans at other parts of the organization, other levels of the organization, in a similar way, because this is the interface that we think can actually really accelerate it. How's that working, Tammy?
I love this piece. So we're not as clear, like alter my notes, get clear, get clear, get clear. That's what I've loved about this. We have a lot of executive buy-in, but we haven't been as crisp as you are talking about this. And I think that's where the power comes from. So we've talked about experiences, and we've had leaders create it, but we haven't mapped it like this. I just love this next step to really move and shift the culture. Great job.
Awesome. Okay, and then I'll just breeze past this. I mentioned we're doing group coaching with them, so, and asking them to step into the group coaching space too. So I know a lot of you are coaches, so this will also look familiar to you. These are just some of the concepts we're using with them. So just to circle back, too many words on this slide. Mental note, edit that. But remember I said at the beginning, we have the talent and capabilities to succeed today and tomorrow. That's why we exist. So how do we know if it's working in this space? Short-term, Ohio Health achieves balanced scorecard results of finance, quality, service, and culture, because that means that our executives are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And succession planning is being leveraged in more than 80% of our openings, which, yay, we're doing it. But easy to do for 18 months, right? Because right now it's shiny and they just have to agree with me. Long-term measure of success, they have to keep doing it once they see the executives get in the jobs. That means they have to actually be good at doing the jobs once they get in them. Because if we get the people in the jobs with the succession plans and then they don't succeed, then either the succession plan wasn't right or the executive development wasn't right and they're not ready. So it has to keep working. And that's how we know that we're doing the right work in this space. But also we know because the board starts to notice, and the board is like, hey, I want to see your key talent metrics, because that's how we know that this organization is really succeeding. And okay, because I think that we should all be taking over the world, we're fostering intentional, desirable turnover, and we're becoming expert importers and exporters of top talent to level up the organization as a whole, or the industry as a whole. So wouldn't it be cool if we got so good at this that we were intentionally growing executives who were like, that's great, but I don't want to just do this at Ohio Health. I don't have another frontier here. I actually want to go do this somewhere else because I've got more to give. And that we were bringing in people from other organizations who were like, you know what, I see that I could come here and keep growing and do more and give more. So I want to be part of a broader talent community. All right, that's it.
Any last minute questions for Alice? I know we got just a couple minutes left.
Alice, I want to thank you. I got kicked off a few times, so we're having very bad weather in Charleston, South Carolina, but just thank you and how inclusive it was, because oftentimes when I see something like this, it's not for me. And some people on here know I've said that before, and I'm just really knowing that's a part of what this is, but it's not always the case. And so love the component that you talked about with women and people of color, and women of color especially too, because I'm finding that when I see these, and when I, and you see folk moving and they don't like you and representation matters, then it begins to make us not trust the process. And if we're the leaders who are working with that, it's hard to trust the process. But I'm really loving the components and the intentionality. So thank you, as well as your team and everybody that's, showing that it can happen, and the intentionality behind the inclusiveness of making it happen, being more than just words, but seeing every component in between my Zoom shutting me out. So thank you so much.
Awesome. You're welcome.
I just also wanted to echo my thanks again, new member here, so I don't know if this is the caliber of all the presentations, then I can't wait to join more. MGB is in the early stages of enterprise succession management and planning, and so it's really wonderful to hear a system that is still has a lot of wins and successes, but also is learning and building too. And so it's great to get that perspective. So thank you, Ava. I took a lot of notes, and
Awesome.
we'll bring them back to the team. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate you hopping on for our monthly call, and we'll see you May 9th for our next Leadership Development Council call. Thank you, Alice.
Thanks, Alice. Get
Thank
feeling
you.
better.
Thank you.
Yes, feel better. Thanks, everyone.